the after-hours shopper. It was a night like any other when Daniel, a grocery store worker, got the news. His manager, Mr. Collins, pulled him aside just as he was finishing up stacking cans of soup. "Daniel," he said, "we've been watching you. You're reliable, hardworking, and we think you're ready for more responsibility." Daniel couldn't believe it. He'd been promoted to night shift manager. It wasn't glamorous, but for someone who had been stocking shelves for 2 years, it was a big step forward. The raise didn't hurt either. His first few nights went smoothly. Daniel liked the quiet of the store after hours. Without customers bustling about, he could focus on making sure everything looked perfect for the morning crew. But then, strange things started to happen. The first sign. One night, Daniel was in the back office reviewing inventory when he heard a faint sound coming from the store floor. It was a soft rustling, like someone walking through the aisles. At first, he dismissed it as his imagination. The store was old, and the building made noises, creaks, and groans that he'd grown used to. But as the nights went on, the noises became harder to ignore. Shelves would creak, and cans would roll across the floor. One time, Daniel found a loaf of bread sitting in the middle of the dairy aisle, far from where it belonged. "What the heck," he muttered, picking it up and returning it to the bread section. He told himself it was nothing. Maybe a coworker had misplaced it, or maybe he had overlooked it during his rounds. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The locked doors. The real trouble began a week later. Daniel had finished locking up for the night and was halfway through organizing the cereal aisle when he noticed something strange. A bag of chips was open on a nearby shelf, crumbs scattered everywhere. "No way," Daniel said aloud. He was sure he had locked the doors. He double-checked them every night before starting his tasks. He went to the front entrance to inspect the locks. They were secure, just as he had left them. Nobody could have gotten in. Still, the mess bothered him. Someone or something had been there. But who? The security cameras. Determined to figure out what was going on, Daniel decided to check the security cameras. He wasn't used to the system, so it took him a while to find the footage from the previous night. As he watched, he saw himself locking the doors and walking through the aisles, doing his usual routine. Then, around midnight, something strange happened. The cameras picked up movement in the produce section. At first, it looked like a shadow flickering across the screen, but as the figure came closer, Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. It was a person, or at least it looked like one. The figure was faint, almost transparent, but its movements were deliberate. It glided through the aisles, picking up items and placing them in a cart that wasn't there. Daniel froze, heart pounding. The figure didn't look like any customer he'd ever seen. Its face was blurred, its features indistinct. But there was something undeniably human and unnervingly wrong about it. The footage ended with the figure disappearing into thin air, leaving no trace behind. The investigation. Daniel couldn't ignore what he had seen. The next day, he asked Mr. Collins if anything strange had ever happened in the store. Mr. Collins chuckled. "You mean like ghosts?" "Come on, Daniel, this is a grocery store, not a haunted house." But Daniel wasn't laughing. He decided to do some digging on his own. He started by talking to his coworkers. Most of them shrugged off his questions, but one older employee, Martha, seemed uneasy. "You're not the first person to notice weird things around here," she said in a hushed voice. "Back when I started, there was talk about an accident. A worker got crushed by falling shelves in aisle 5. They said it was an accident, but she trailed off, looking over her shoulder." But what Daniel pressed. "Some people think the store was cursed, built on bad ground or something. I don't know, I just keep my head down and do my job." The curse. The more Daniel learned, the stranger the story became. He found old newspaper articles about the accident Martha had mentioned. A young man named Peter had been working late when a shelf collapsed, killing him instantly. The article hinted at safety violations but didn't go into detail. Daniel also discovered something else. The store had been built on land that used to belong to a family farm. The farm had been sold under mysterious circumstances, and the family had disappeared shortly after. It all started to make sense, or at least as much sense as a ghost story could make. The figure in the security footage wasn't just any ghost. It was tied to the store, to the land, and to the tragedies that had taken place there. The ghost's wrath. Things escalated quickly after that. The ghostly figure began appearing every night, becoming more active and aggressive. Shelves were knocked over, items were thrown across the store, and Daniel started hearing whispers whenever he was alone. One night, the ghost showed itself to him directly. Daniel was in the frozen food section when he felt a cold breeze. He turned around and saw a pale, shadowy figure with hollow eyes and outstretched hands. "Leave it," hissed. Daniel stumbled backward, knocking over a display of frozen peas. When he looked up, the ghost was gone. The ritual. Desperate to end the haunting, Daniel turned to the internet for answers. He found forums about paranormal activity and even contacted a local expert on the supernatural. The expert told him the only way to break the curse was to perform a ritual to release the ghost's spirit. It involved a specific combination of items: a candle, salt, and an object that belonged to the deceased. Daniel managed to track down an old photo of Peter, the worker who had died in the accident. Armed with the photo and the ritual supplies, he prepared for the most terrifying night of his life. The final confrontation. The ritual wasn't easy. As Daniel lit the candle and began to chant the words he had memorized, the ghost appeared, more furious than ever. It screamed, knocking over shelves and sending glass bottles shattering to the floor. "Please," Daniel begged. "I'm trying to help you." The ghost paused, its hollow eyes fixed on the photo in Daniel's hand. Slowly, the chaos subsided. The ghost reached out, touched the photo, and vanished in a burst of light. The aftermath. The store was eerily quiet after that. Daniel cleaned up the mess and finished his shift in a daze. The next day, he told Mr. Collins he wanted to transfer to a day shift. "Night work isn't for me," he said. He never spoke about the ghost again, but every now and then when he passed aisle 5, he couldn't help but shiver. The discovery. It was a regular Friday evening at Collins' grocery. The store buzzed with its usual rhythm: checkout beeps, the hum of the refrigerators, and faint pop music playing over the speakers. Jessie, the unofficial leader of the group, stood at the register, her face fixed in boredom. She was 18, with bright red hair tied into a messy bun, always the first to take charge when things got weird. Behind her, Mike, the jokester of the group, was arranging candy bars on a shelf. "If I eat 1 Snickers for every 5 I stack, does that count as exercise?" he joked, tossing one in the air and catching it. "Only if you run laps afterward," Jessie replied without looking up. In the stockroom, Emily, the quiet and curious one, was stacking boxes. She stopped when she noticed something strange. Behind a dusty pile of old canned goods was a wooden box, faded and covered in cobwebs. The words "Do not open" were carved into the top. "Hey guys," Emily called, her voice echoing in the empty room. Jessie and Mike appeared in the doorway, along with Sarah, the new hire, and Tom, the assistant manager, who was usually more interested in his phone than anything else. "What's this?" Emily asked, brushing dust off the box. "Looks like something out of a horror movie," Mike said, grinning. "We should probably leave it alone," Sarah muttered, hugging her arms. She was shy and easily spooked, and this box was giving her all kinds of bad vibes. Jessie smirked. "Where's the fun in that? Let's open it." Tom shrugged. "If it's been here this long, it's probably junk." But Jessie had already pried it open. Inside was a board game unlike anything they'd seen before. The board was shaped like a grocery store layout, with tiny aisles, checkouts, and storage rooms. The pieces were small plastic price tags with their names written on them in bold letters. "That's creepy," Sarah whispered, taking a step back. "I think it's cool," Jessie said. "Let's play." The first turn. Reluctantly, the group gathered around a table in the break room. Jessie placed the board in the center and set the price tag pieces on the start square. She pulled out a yellowed instruction sheet. "The rules are simple," Jessie read aloud. "Take turns rolling the dice. Complete the task on your space. Failure to comply will result in punishment." "What kind of punishment?" Emily asked. "Probably something silly," Jessie replied. "Come on, it's just a game." Tom rolled his eyes. "Fine, let's get this over with." Jessie rolled the dice first. It landed on a 5. She moved her piece forward and stopped on a square labeled "Clean up aisle 7." Suddenly, the room darkened. The fluorescent lights flickered, and a loud crash echoed from the store floor. "What was that?" Sarah gasped. "It's probably just a coincidence," Jessie said, though her voice wavered. She stood up and headed toward aisle 7. The others hesitated before following her. When they reached the aisle, they found jars of pickles shattered on the floor, green liquid spreading everywhere. A broom and dustpan appeared out of nowhere, standing upright like they were waiting for someone. "Okay, that's weird," Mike said, glancing around. Jessie picked up the broom and started cleaning. As soon as she finished, the light stabilized and the eerie tension lifted. See? No big deal. Yeah, super normal, Sarah muttered sarcastically. The game gets serious. Back in the break room, it was Mike's turn. He rolled a 3 and landed on a square labeled price check. Before anyone could react, a loud voice boomed from the game board. Price check required in aisle 3. With the mic started, but he was already being pulled toward the aisle, as if an invisible force was guiding him. When they reached aisle 3, the shelves were empty except for one item, a single can of soup. A scanner appeared on the floor, glowing faintly. What am I supposed to do? Mike asked nervously. Scan it, Jesse said. Mike hesitated, then picked up the can and scanned it. The scanner beeped, but instead of a price, a message appeared incorrect. Try again. Suddenly, cans flew off the shelves, pelting them from all directions. The group screamed and ducked as the cans seemed to target Mike specifically. Do it again, Jesse shouted. Mike grabbed the can and scanned it again. This time, the scanner displayed the price $3.99. The can stopped mid-air and fell to the ground with a loud clatter. Okay, this is not just a game, Sarah said, her face pale. The stakes rise. As the night went on, each turn became more dangerous. Emily had to climb a towering stack of boxes to retrieve a missing item, nearly falling to her death when the stack wobbled violently. Sarah was forced to face her fear of spiders when a swarm appeared out of nowhere, crawling toward her until she completed her task. The game seemed to feed on their fears, pushing them to their limits. Tom, who had been skeptical from the start, finally admitted, "We need to stop playing." But how? Emily asked. "It won't let us quit." The game board seemed to mock them, the pieces glowing faintly as if daring them to keep going. Uncovering the truth. As they played, the group began noticing clues hidden within the tasks. Old receipts, faded photos, and cryptic messages hinted at the game's origin. Emily pieced together that the game was tied to the store's history. Decades ago, a disgruntled employee had cursed the place after being fired unfairly. The board game was his twisted creation, designed to trap anyone who dared disturb it. "We have to destroy it," Jesse said. "That's the only way to end this." "But how?" Sarah asked. "Finish the game," Emily said. "And then burn it." The final round. The final round was the most terrifying. The board instructed them to split up and complete tasks simultaneously. Jessie faced a shadowy figure in the stockroom, a manifestation of her fear of failure. Mike had to navigate the dark, maze-like aisles while being chased by something he couldn't see. Emily and Sarah worked together to solve a puzzle in the bakery section, their hands trembling as the walls seemed to close in around them. Finally, they completed their tasks, and the board announced, "Game over." The end. The group wasted no time. They took the board outside and set it on fire. As the flames consumed it, the store seemed to exhale, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. "I think so," Jessie said, watching the ashes scatter in the wind. But as they turned to leave, a faint voice whispered behind them, "Would you like to play again? A new start." Mira walked into the brightly lit store on her first day. The smell of freshly cleaned floors and coffee from the break room filled the air. She had been hired as a cashier, and while it wasn't her dream job, they paid the bills. The manager, Mr. Grayson, was polite but distant. "Welcome aboard," he said with a practiced smile. "Your locker is number 23. Don't lose the key, it's important." Mira nodded, wondering why a simple locker deserved such emphasis. She didn't think much of it until later. The odd behaviors begin. After a few days, Mira noticed her coworkers acted strangely about their lockers. Whenever she walked by the rows of steel lockers, they seemed tense, watching her closely. Emma, a fellow cashier, even snapped at her once when Mira accidentally brushed against her locker door. "Don't touch it," Emma said, her voice shaking. "I wasn't. Sorry," Mira replied, backing away. Even stranger, people rarely opened their lockers in front of others. They would wait until the room was empty, then quickly open and close the doors as if guarding something precious. The whispering night. One night, Mira had to stay late. The store was empty except for her and the janitor, who was cleaning the floors far away. As she walked past the locker room, she froze. There were muffled voices coming from inside. She pushed the door open slightly and peeked in. The room was empty, but the whispers continued, soft and chilling. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice trembling. The whispers stopped, digging for answers. The next day, Mira couldn't stop thinking about what she heard. She decided to ask her coworkers about the lockers, but no one wanted to talk. "Just leave it alone," said Tom, one of the stalkers. His face was pale. Emma avoided her completely. Even the janitor muttered, "Some things are better not known," before walking away. Frustrated, Mira decided to investigate on her own. The hidden truth. Mira stayed late again, waiting until the store was empty. She crept into the locker room and began examining the lockers. She noticed strange scratches on the doors, almost like symbols. She tried opening her own locker, number 23, but the key wouldn't turn. It was as if the lock was resisting her. Suddenly she heard footsteps and quickly hid. Through the crack in the door, she saw Mr. Grayson enter. He walked up to a locker, placed his hand on it, and whispered something. The locker seemed to hum softly in response. Mira's heart raced. What was he doing? A dark revelation. The next day, Mira confronted Emma. "I saw Mr. Grayson in the locker room last night. What's going on?" Emma's face went pale. "You shouldn't have seen that." "Tell me the truth," Mira insisted. After a long pause, Emma sighed. "The lockers aren't normal. They hold pieces of us, our souls." Mira stared at her in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Emma explained that when employees joined the store, they unknowingly agreed to a pact. The management took a part of their souls and locked them away. This made the employees loyal and obedient, unable to leave the job, no matter how much they wanted to. The price of freedom. Mira couldn't believe what she was hearing. She decided to test it herself. That night, she snuck into the locker room and forced open one of the lockers. Inside, she found a small glowing orb, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. She reached out to touch it, and a wave of sadness and fear washed over her. She quickly shut the door. The next day, Emma confronted her. "What did you do?" she hissed. "I saw it," Mira said. "You're telling the truth. But why don't you fight back?" Emma shook her head. "You don't understand. If we destroy the lockers, we lose what's left of ourselves. And if we try to leave the store, it won't let us." A choice to make. Mira was torn. She couldn't let this continue, but she was terrified of what might happen if she tried to stop it. That night, she stayed late again, this time armed with a crowbar. She planned to break into more lockers and free the trapped souls. As she worked, the air grew colder, and the whispers returned, louder this time. They seemed to plead with her. Suddenly, Mr. Grayson appeared, his face dark with anger. "You shouldn't be here," he said. The final confrontation. Mira stood her ground. "You're trapping people here. It's wrong." Mr. Grayson laughed coldly. They agreed to it. They just didn't read the fine print. He stepped closer, and the air grew heavy. "If you destroy the lockers, you'll doom them all. But if you join us, you'll have a place here forever." Mira realized she had a choice: join the pact and lose part of herself, or fight back and risk everything. Breaking the cycle. With a scream, Mira swung the crowbar at her own locker. The door shattered, and the glowing orb inside floated into the air before vanishing. Mr. Grayson howled in rage as the room began to shake. The other lockers burst open one by one, their orbs escaping into the night. The whispers turned into cries of relief, then faded away. Epilogue: A new beginning. When the chaos ended, the store was silent. Mr. Grayson was gone, and the lockers were empty. Mira felt a strange sense of peace, knowing she had freed the others. She walked out of the store, leaving her name tag behind. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. Introduced the small town setting in the grocery store. Described the local legends around aisle 13 and its cursed reputation. Introduced Sarah, her motivation, and her plan to investigate. Building suspense. Sarah starts working at the store and experiences odd occurrences in aisle 13. Show how the disappearances affect the staff and customers. Sarah befriends an employee who shares personal stories about the aisle. Discovery of the truth. Sarah starts piecing together clues about the disappearances. She accidentally triggers the portal and sees glimpses of the other dimension. A tense encounter with a creature from the other side. Climax. Sarah develops a plan to close the portal. She discovers that someone in the town is protecting the gateway for their own reasons. A dramatic confrontation in aisle 13. Resolution. The portal is sealed, but at a cost. Sarah reflects on what she learned and the emotional toll of the experience. A hint that the danger might not be entirely gone. Full story text. I'll now write the story in full. It will take some time to craft, so please hold on. The Haunted Isle. Introduction to Quiet Town, a dark mystery. Misty Pines was a small town where everyone knew everyone. It had a quiet charm with its single main street lined with cozy diners, a hardware store, and the town's only grocery store, Pines Market. The store wasn't big, but it was where everyone came for their weekly shopping and to catch up on the latest gossip. For years, people whispered about aisle 13. It was the aisle near the back, where dusty shelves held cleaning supplies, brooms, and other uninteresting items. Yet, strange things always happened there. Items would fall without anyone touching them. Light bulbs flickered, and sometimes people swore the air turned freezing cold. Most people laughed it off as a spooky town legend, but some believed there was truth to it, especially since the disappearances started. Mrs. Calhoun, the elderly cashier, still spoke in hushed tones about Mr. Jenkins, the night janitor who never came back from his shift 2 years ago. Then there was Sarah, the teenage girl from down the street, who vanished while shopping late one evening. The police searched everywhere, but all they found was her shopping cart in aisle 13. When investigative journalist Sarah Blake heard about this strange little town and its haunted aisle, she couldn't resist. She was known for solving mysteries that others ignored, so she packed her bags, drove to Misty Pines, and applied for a job at Pines Market. She didn't tell anyone she was a journalist. To everyone in town, she was just another new employee. But Sarah had a plan to uncover the truth about aisle 13. Building suspense, strange events begin. On her first day, Sarah met the staff Donna, the friendly manager Tom, the quiet stock boy and Lucy, the chatty cashier. They welcomed her warmly, though Sarah noticed a strange tension whenever aisle 13 came up. You'll want to avoid stocking shelves there, Donna said with a nervous laugh during orientation. Things happen. Weird things. Just stick to the produce section. Sarah smiled politely, but her curiosity grew. That evening, after the store closed, she wandered over to aisle 13 with her notepad. At first, it looked ordinary rows of neatly rearranged cleaning products and mops. But the air felt heavy, as if something invisible was pressing down on her. Suddenly, a bottle of floor cleaner fell off the shelf, landing inches from her feet. She jumped back, her heart pounding. She glanced around, no one else was there. The next few days brought more strange occurrences. While stocking shelves in another aisle, Sarah overheard customers whispering about someone who had gone missing last month. He was in aisle 13, one woman said. I told him not to go there after dark. Sarah decided to dig deeper. During her breaks, she befriended Tom, the stock boy who seemed to know more than he let on. It's not just rumors, Tom said one afternoon, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. I've seen things, shadows moving when no one's there. And once I heard someone calling my name, but the aisle was empty. Why don't you leave? Sarah asked, her voice low. Tom shrugged. Where else would I go? Besides, people would think I'm crazy. But I stay away from aisle 13 at night. You should too. Discovery of the truth, the portal. One night, Sarah stayed late, pretending to clean up after hours. She hid near the back of the store, her eyes fixed on aisle 13. Hours passed and nothing happened. She was starting to think it was all in her head when the temperature suddenly dropped. Her breath came out in misty puffs. Then she saw a faint, shimmering glow at the far end of the aisle. She stepped closer, her hands trembling. As she neared the glow, she felt a strange pull, as if something was calling her forward. Before she could stop herself, she reached out and touched the light. Instantly, the world around her shifted. She found herself standing in a dark, endless void. The shelves were gone, replaced by towering, shadowy figures with glowing eyes. Sarah gasped. The figures didn't move, but she felt their presence pressing into her mind. They weren't human. She couldn't explain how she knew, but they felt ancient, powerful, and hungry. You don't belong here, a voice whispered in her ear, though no one was there. Terrified, Sarah stumbled backward. She fell onto the cold tile floor of the grocery store. The glow was gone, and aisle 13 looked normal again, but Sarah knew she had seen something real. Climax, a fight for survival. Sarah spent the next few days piecing together clues. She discovered that the portal in aisle 13 only opened at specific times, aligning with strange symbols carved into the floor. These symbols weren't random, they were part of an ancient ritual. While researching in the town's library, Sarah found old records that mentioned disappearances dating back to the 1800s. It seemed the portal had been there long before the grocery store was built. But why? Sarah's answer came from an unlikely source, Donna, the store manager. Sarah confronted her one evening, showing her the symbols she had found. Donna's face turned pale. "I didn't want this," Donna whispered, tears in her eyes. "My grandfather told me about it, the portal. It needs to stay open. If we close it, the creatures will come through fully, and no one will survive." "You're protecting it?" Sarah asked, horrified. "I'm protecting the town," Donna said. "You don't understand what they can do." But Sarah refused to accept that answer. She knew the disappearances had to stop. That night, she returned to the store armed with what she had learned. Using a combination of symbols and tools she had read about, she prepared a ritual to seal the portal. As she worked, the air grew cold, and the shadows lengthened. The creatures began to emerge, their glowing eyes fixed on her. Sarah's hands shook as she drew the final symbol. "Leave," she screamed at them. "You don't belong here." The creatures let out an otherworldly howl, but as the last symbol glowed bright, the portal began to collapse. The light grew blinding, and then everything went silent. Resolution: the aftermath. When Sarah woke up, she was lying in the middle of aisle 13. The air felt normal again, no heaviness, no cold. The portal was gone. The next morning, she told Donna what had happened. Donna didn't say much, but Sarah could tell she was relieved. "Thank you," Donna said quietly. Sarah left Misty Pines a few days later. She wrote an article about her experience, though she doubted anyone would truly believe it. But she knew what she had seen, and she knew the cost of keeping the portal closed. As she drove away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the creatures weren't gone forever. They were out there somewhere, waiting for another chance.